Can I ask you something?
Of course.
When did we get so busy that we stopped feeling close?
Have you ever just looked across the room at your partner, the person you literally committed your entire life to, and felt this invisible wall between you? It's that quiet, really heavy feeling, a sense of distance that just kind of creeps in, even when nothing is overtly wrong. Well, today we're diving into a deeply reflective topic, something psychologists call the marriage misdiagnosis. We're going to look closely at why emotional distance doesn't always mean what we think it means, and why so many of us spend years trying to fix the absolute wrong thing.
So, let's just jump right into it. There is this core, honestly painful question that plagues so many couples when they hit a season of emotional distance. And it goes like this. We're doing everything we're supposed to do, so why do we still feel so far apart? I mean, you might be splitting the household chores perfectly, you're going to all the family events, you're managing the kids' schedules like clockwork, and yet there's just this gaping void. And naturally, you start to wonder, is the love just fading away?
For a lot of couples, let's call them Michael and Sarah for our story today. It usually looks something like this. It's late at night in the kitchen. One partner is just rubbing their neck, physically carrying the weight of the day, while the other looks on with this deep, quiet concern. This is the visible symptom of a hidden disconnect. So what do? We try to fix it. We try forcing more communication. We try scheduling more time together. But somehow, almost inexplicably, the harder you try to bridge that gap, the wider it seems to get. And man, the frustration just mounts.
When a marriage starts feeling distant like that, our first instinct is usually to jump straight to surface-level solutions. We tell ourselves, okay, we need better communication, or we just need more date nights, more intimacy, some quality time. And look, these are incredibly well-intentioned. They're healthy practices, but they so often fail to solve the real problem. Why? Well, think of it this way. Imagine walking into your kitchen and seeing a massive puddle of water on the floor. You could literally spend all day mopping it up, but if there's a leaking pipe behind the wall, yeah, the water's just going to keep coming back. So many of us are furiously mopping the floor, treating those surface symptoms, while the leaking pipe remains completely untouched.
It's really helpful to think of this disconnect like an iceberg. Up at the top, right in the conscious mind where we live every day, that's where the visible conflict happens. You know, the bickering about finances or who didn't take out the trash. But when you look beneath the surface, deep down in the unconscious mind, that is where the real, untouched issues live. We're talking about the fear of vulnerability, profound loneliness, feelings of rejection, and just a really deep longing to connect. Couples will debate those surface issues endlessly, while the massive, deep-rooted emotional needs underneath are what's actually dictating the distance between them.
And because we don't naturally see what's happening beneath that surface, we fall victim to what is probably the single most damaging belief in relationships. We tell ourselves, well, if we feel distant, we must be falling out of love. But here is the absolute crucial point. Distance and a lack of love are not the same thing, not even close. Deeply loving couples experience seasons of profound emotional distance all the time, and it's not because they've stopped caring. It's actually because of something much more biological and, quite frankly, practical.
That cold, icy chasm separating two people. Most of the time, it wasn't created by a lack of love. It was created by life, slowly but surely consuming the energy that connection requires. Just think about how many of us wake up and we're already exhausted, right? We're facing heavy work demands, financial stress, relentless parenting duties, health scares, family drama. By the time the evening rolls around, our emotional energy bank is completely overdrawn. And when emotional energy becomes scarce, our connection to our partner is tragically the very first thing to go.
Here is where the clinical reality of our nervous systems is just fascinating. When human beings face chronic stress, our brains get flooded with cortisol, and we automatically shift into survival mode. In survival mode, we become task-focused, problem-focused, and totally obsessed with efficiency, purely to conserve whatever resources we have left. As a result, we completely lose access to connection mode. That's the state where we're playful, curious, and emotionally available. When you're just trying to survive the week, your brain literally shuts down the biological systems required for deep emotional connection.
So, for a partner who is incredibly overwhelmed, like Michael in our example, his brain automatically activates this kind of invisible protection shield. His biology is literally prioritizing threat analysis and resource conservation over connecting with Sarah. And here's the thing, he isn't doing this intentionally to hurt her. His nervous system is just trying to keep him functioning. But the terrible irony here is that from the outside looking in, this automatic biological response looks exactly like intentional emotional withdrawal.
And that is what creates this tragic, isolated disconnect.
While one partner sits there feeling the crushing, invisible weight of their own exhaustion, the other partner is sitting across the room feeling incredibly isolated and misunderstood. One spouse feels completely overwhelmed by life, while the other perceives that exact same behavior as a personal rejection. One is seeing survival mode, the other is seeing disinterest. And suddenly, without even realizing it, both partners are reacting to entirely different realities.
When that distance goes unexplained, our minds, because they hate a vacuum, desperately try to fill the void. We start spinning these narratives. One partner notices the quiet and immediately asks, "Did I do something wrong? Why don't they talk to me anymore?" Meanwhile, the other partner, who's already buckling under all this internal pressure, notices the disappointment and thinks, "Man, I'm falling short. I'm failing them too." These diverging internal monologues build these massive, impenetrable walls. And it's all based entirely on stories rather than the reality of what the other person is actually going through.
Eventually, the communication just breaks down entirely. One is processing the world through pure data points, efficiency, and finding solutions just to get through the day. The other is desperately reaching out for empathy, feeling, and emotional validation. The result? Just a thick cloud of misunderstanding in the middle of the living room. You might still be successfully managing the logistics of life together, getting the kids to soccer, paying the mortgage, running the household, but you've entirely stopped sharing your inner worlds. You've stopped sharing the fears, the disappointments, and the deep burnout.
Over time, it's like you become excellent co-managers in the business of life, but total strangers to each other's inner world. One person becomes encased in this protective layer of ice, while the other is reaching out, desperate but completely frozen out. And listen, intimacy simply cannot survive on logistics alone. It starves. Because true, lasting emotional connection absolutely demands emotional visibility. You literally have to let the other person see what is happening inside of you.
Okay, so how do we actually break the ice? Well, it starts with a massive paradigm shift. Instead of asking the panicked question, how do we reconnect, or why don't you love me anymore, we need to step back and ask a profoundly different question. What might be making connection difficult right now? This question changes the game. It stops treating the distance as the core problem to be fixed, and it starts treating that distance as a vital signal that something else is heavy.
When you treat distance as a signal, that's when the hard shell finally begins to crack. When you approach your partner with comfort instead of accusation, those defenses fracture, and the vulnerable emotions underneath can finally surface. You might just discover that the real issue isn't a lack of communication skills, and it's certainly not a fading romance. The real issue is unspoken fear. It's chronic, low-grade stress. It's the quiet desperation of carrying way too much weight for far too long without having a safe place to put it down. It really all comes down to this absolutely crucial shift in how we think. Distance isn't evidence that love disappeared. It is evidence that life became heavy. Let that sink in for a second. So many beautiful, healthy, fundamentally sound marriages do not suffer from a lack of love. They suffer from unseen stress, hidden burdens, and years of simply misunderstanding what distance actually means. To find your way back to each other, you have to hit pause. You have to look beneath that painful distance. When a couple finally sits close, holds hands, and talks softly about what's really going on, you can almost feel the relief that comes with emotional visibility. Because when you finally understand the real symptom, the exhaustion, the deep fear, the overwhelming nature of life right now, you can stop fighting the distance and you can start fighting the real enemy together. That is how you begin healing the actual wound.
If the concepts in this explainer are really hitting home for you today, the source material highlights a couple of fantastic resources to help you go deeper into this exact healing process. First, there's a great Kindle book called Harmonious Marriage: Elevate Your Marriage with Self-Awareness. It's incredibly helpful for identifying and breaking those negative narrative patterns we talked about and building real emotional safety. And if you're someone who appreciates ancient philosophy, Mantras of Love, based on Hindu wisdom, applies some truly timeless principles to modern relationship resilience. We've got links to both of those down in the description if you want to check them out. Doing this work, this journey of truly understanding each other, it ultimately leads you right back to each other, walking side by side, relaxed, and genuinely hopeful again. So, if your marriage feels incredibly distant right now, please don't lose hope. Remember, distance is so often just a misdiagnosed symptom. It is an invitation to look a little deeper, to understand your partner's survival mode, and to reconnect authentically by facing the heavy burdens of life as a team.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question to reflect on. Maybe even bring it up with your partner tonight. What unspoken burdens are you carrying that might be creating distance in your marriage right now? Think about the weight you haven't shared yet, because your relationship doesn't have to stay frozen in survival mode. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, take care of yourself and please take care of each other.